I would like to welcome those members of the public and press who are joining us today for this meeting of the Combined Authority Board. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting, follow the Democratic Services officers who can lead us to the assembly point. A reminder to those present that the public session of this meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Combined Authority's website. Can I also ask everyone present to turn mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? As always, I welcome and value the views of all board members during our debates. I do, though, reserve the right to exercise my discretion as chair during the course of the meeting to determine the time permitted for speeches and the number of speeches to be made by any member or officer in order to manage the meeting efficiently. I'm going to move on now. So, in regards to apologies for absence, would the head of Democratic Services let us know of any apologies or changes in regards to substitutions?
Thank you, Mayor. We have apologies this morning from Daryl Preston, from John O'Brien, from Councillor Bridget Smith, and we have Councillor John Williams here substituting, and from Councillor Dennis Jones, and we've got Councillor Angus Ellis here substituting. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you again, specifically to John and Angus there for stepping in, and my very best wishes to our missing leaders who are a little bit under the weather, but we move on, and I'm grateful that their representation is here today. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in any items being considered today? All right. Okay. As always, declarations of interest can be made at any point during the meeting. Item 3 is the proposal for bus fare cap change. Judith Barker, our Executive Director for Place and Connectivity, will present the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce with a few words, as I'm sure all members have been able to review and consider the paper this week. We obviously have 3 recommendations. The first, to consider retaining a fare cap at £2 for a single journey for those participating operators in the Combined Authority area for a 3-month period to the 31st of March 2025. And then following that, if dependent on the conclusion of that, then we're asking for authority to be delegated to the assistant directors who actually work with local operators to implement that. And obviously asking the board to note that this conversation is purely about the January, February, March 2025 period. I'm just going to draw out 1 or 2 key issues from the report. In terms of the timing of this paper and a need for an emergency meeting, obviously the Prime Minister only made the announcement at the end of October regarding the change to the fare caps. The fare cap was due to run out on the 31st of December, and then the government announced to introduce a £3 fare cap to replace the £2 fare cap. And so we've been working since that period, following a discussion in particular at Leaders' Strategy meeting recently, to bring forward a paper for the board to formally consider. I've noted that a number of other MCA areas have considered and taken a number of different approaches, and indeed this week the North East have decided on a £2.50 fare cap in addition to what the paper says. I've obviously drawn out that strategically we have the local transport and connectivity plan, which has sort of modal shift to sustainable passenger transport as a key part, and that's clearly important, and that's also borne out in the bus strategy, which in particular notes the need for affordable transport offering good value for money. The terms of our BSIP funding for 24-25 do allow us to use those funds to keep travel affordable. We have provided some links and information about recent reports that the Department for Transport has at interim level that draw out particularly the value of a fare cap, and also the conversations we've had with local operators who, we won't be surprised to hear, are concerned about anything that might detract from passenger numbers. We've also highlighted the costings, and we estimate for the 3 months at the beginning of the next financial year, it will cost approximately £1 million to have a subsidy to have a £2 fare cap in this area. If we were looking at a £2.50 fare cap, it's probably slightly more than half because there are a number of fixed costs to be considered. But clearly, a higher cap would result in a lower cost. But clearly, we are continuing to look at all the details and indeed speak to the operators about that. You will see in 4.1 that actually it's a pretty complicated formula that drives some of these numbers. So I hope members will appreciate my vagueness isn't a lack of attention to detail, but the complexity of the DfT's systems for calculating that. The proposal is, if the board were minded to agree the fare cap, then we are proposing to use the £1 million that's currently underspent in the Combined Authorities bus programme, BSIP programme. I know from the meeting we had in November, obviously the board, as well as ourselves, our officers, are disappointed that we have that underspend at present, but that is driven by the volume of work that we have done within the team with a very small team. So you'll be aware of the work that's been happening on the bus reform consultation, the procurement, and indeed the Tiger Card, Tiger on Demand, and other initiatives. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to progress some of the BSIP activity to the point of delivery with that small team. So that is what has generated the capacity to be able to have £1 million that could be used for this purpose. I think at that point, I would just draw members' attention to, obviously, there's quite a large legal implications section, which the monitoring officer can comment further. But at that point, Chair, I hope that's a useful introduction to the key points for members, and I will hand back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Judith. I will open the report to debate by the board. Councillor Comboy, Sarah.
Thank you. Can I start really with a question, just a point of clarification, because that would be really helpful. We've had our full council this week, and you won't be surprised to hear that there was a question around our overview and scrutiny process, and why this hasn't necessarily come through that process. Now, I'd quite just like a reminder about why we're in that position, because I think that clarity would really help our members. I suspect it's a timing issue, but that clarity, I think, will give our members reassurance. Thank you.
I think that's a question for legal team. Matthew, if you'd come in.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor. Yeah, it is due to the urgency of the issue. Obviously, it's been done under the urgency rules, which means that a notice was sent to the Chair of Scrutiny with regard to the fact that it's coming in this way, given the time limits available following the decision, as Judith has mentioned, from the change to the bus fare cap to when it could be looked at and then put before the board for a decision. Clearly, it doesn't prevent the scrutiny at the Combined Authority looking at the matter in the new year as it considers what happens as you move on and maybe consider it a bit later or how the decision was made. So I appreciate that's more retrospective than is maybe preferable, but it's just down to time constraints. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for that clarification. I think we should take it as a compliment that members value pre-scrutiny, and that they are keen to make sure that they are fulfilling that opportunity at every turn. So I don't think you should view it as a criticism. I think it's a positive that people wish to engage and want to make sure that we've done so fully. Thank you.
Sorry, John. Yep, fine.
Thank you, Mayor. South Cambs supports this. As paragraph 3.3 says, it has helped to bus operators to see their passenger numbers improve to, in some cases, to pre-COVID levels, but not in all cases. And if you speak to the local bus operators, as Judith has mentioned, they are very apprehensive because there continue to be commercial routes that still don't have the patronage that they had pre-pandemic and are very fragile. And you note in paragraph 5.3 that obviously money could be spent on infrastructure, but it's clear from the bus operators that if the cap was increased to £3, there would be a drop in passengers. That could lead, certainly on the commercial services, to either a reduction in service frequency or the withdrawal of the commercial service. And in both those cases, we would have to pick up the cost of replacing those services, which I suggest would probably be more than the £1 million that we have in the budget to support the £2 fare cap. So I believe that by extending it to March, it gives us time to look at the alternatives, such as having a £2.50 fare instead of a £3 fare, and ensures that our bus operators can continue to get back the passengers that they lost during the pandemic. So, as I say, South Cambs is supporting this. Thank you.
Angus, I think you indicated that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this proposal to extend the £2 cap to March 2025 as a minimum. This measure will help to encourage use of public transport over private car, keeping journeys more affordable if this is agreed. This is good news, the good news for the start of 2025 as we run up into Christmas and into the new year. After the new year, obviously people may have less money because of overspent at Christmas, and also we're coming to the January sales, so it's a key time not to be going back to the £3 cap and encouraging more use, and at a very busy time of year. And hopefully, maybe when we come towards the end of March, we can look again at what we can do for the rest of the year. And also I'm keen, especially being a member of the Transport Committee, that we also look carefully at the underspend we have on transport and look at improving bus services across the whole of Cambridgeshire.
You've already spoken once, but I'm assuming this is now to speak.
I was going to say, may I now, having asked a question, move to comment in the debate? And I'll make it very short. Huntingdonshire is also happy to support the proposal before us. Thank you.
Councillor Ness.
Thank you. I will also be short and just say that I'm also happy to support the proposal before us. I think given the timescales, this is a sensible option to allow both the combined authority and the bus operators to work out what the right next steps are. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey, Anna.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I mean, clearly, making public transport and bus services attractive by making fares, accessible and low is, important part of the mix of delivering a good quality public transport network and encouraging people to use it. And I'm very conscious of cost of living issues at the moment. So, I think it was regrettable that we got into a position where the bus cap was going up to £3. By central government. This was previously a central government funded thing. At least there is a cap, that's good. But I did listen carefully on Radio Cambridgeshire on Monday, because I think your good self Mayor was on the radio. And Bruce, who was a former bus user from Chatteris, was on the radio on Monday. And for me, he exemplifies the problem that I've got, really, that I want to talk about. So he spoke about issues with loss of services and changes to the timetable from Chatteris to Cambridge. And of course, my residents in East Cambridgeshire are suffering the same issues with the number 9 service from Littleport to Cambridge, where we've gone down from 3 buses on that route to 2. and it has absolutely hollowed out the timetable. And hey presto, since the changes were made in April, we've seen a 62.5% drop off in the passenger journey numbers. So lower fares for the people that aren't able to use the Chatteris to Cambridge bus and the number 9 Littleport to Cambridge bus are no earthly good to them. And yet they are still paying the precept, which increased by 200% this year. So they've been paying this precept and getting a reduction in services that they can't use. So I think for them, this message of money into further subsidising fares when they can't even access a service is a very, very difficult one. And so for me, this proposal is somewhat opportunistic rather than strategic. And what I'm interested in is getting the network into a better place as a whole. And then, you know, fares ought to be rather more at the other end of that problem. You know, for me, the bus service improvement money, you know, I'm not disputing that you are allowed to spend it on this, but I don't think it should be our priority. I think we should be spending the bus service improvement money on improving bus services. And for me, our network has got a very long way to go before it's functioning properly. And I think the Mayor acknowledges that, because I think that's why he's pursuing bus franchising. We're a very, very long way from having a high functioning, high quality bus network. And I think that this money should be going into that. You know, I think it's in the order of 180,000, perhaps £200,000 to commission that third bus from Littleport to Cambridge. You know, we've lost 62.5% of our passengers. Those people are very, very hard won and very easily lost. They are all finding some alternative method of transport to get to where they need to go and do what they need to do. So, you know, we should have put that back in. And I don't know why we haven't, to be honest. I don't know why it's taken all this time. I was promised autumn. Autumn's been and gone. Still nothing's improved. These aren't the only problems. You know, there are lots of precept routes, as Judith has acknowledged, and I understand there are resource issues, but, you know, maybe that's another thing that we should be addressing with this money to deal with those resourcing issues, because there's a lot of precept routes that people have been paying for the last year. They'll be paying their last, if like me, most people pay their council tax in 10 months of instalments. They're paying their last instalment in December. So they've been paying all year for these precept routes. And there are a lot of people who haven't had the precept routes that they've been promised. They've not started. We've been promised Burwell service to get people to the FE colleges in Cambridge, Long Road and Hills Road, Sixth Form College. That's not operating. We've got issues in Whittlesea. I've already mentioned the Chatteris and the Littleport, Streatham, Ely issues that we've got. We've also got routes that are operating at astronomical levels of public subsidy. And I want to remind everybody that we are supposed to be operating, and our review is supposed to be restructuring based on a £12 per passenger journey public subsidy. That's the benchmark. And we have got many, many routes that are operating way beyond that level, way beyond that level. And we just seem to constantly ignore it. That is where the value for money that this authority has agreed is at, £12 per passenger journey. We've got the notorious 7A service, which sterling work has been done to combine that with a homeschool transport service. And I absolutely applaud that. We did some brilliant work in the past on that at Cambridgeshire County Council. It's definitely a way to go. It's a very positive thing, but unfortunately the operator is not complying with the terms of their contract, frustratingly, at the moment. And I know it's annoying the hell out of officers that they're not giving us their passenger data. So we have no way of knowing that £125 cost to the public purse every single time somebody gets on that bus. It's costing the public purse £125 for a single journey, or £250 per return. It's eye-watering sums that are just utterly unsustainable, and we've got no way of knowing if that sort of level is continuing. This money, we're told, is going to run out at the end of March. So £1 million we're estimating lasts us 3 months. The Mayor is currently consulting, specifically wanted to include in the budget consultation, consulting on a 4.99% mayoral precept increase. That raises £0.56 million, so just over £500,000 that will raise. And that's for the year, of course. So if the board in January, because we have to set a legal budget by the end of January, if we decide to, put that increase in, that mayoral precept increase at 4.99% and raise another just over £500,000. And if we decide to spend that money on continuing this bus fare cap process, because it runs out at the end of March, that will get us through to the second week of May, which is conveniently just the other side of the mayoral election. I'm not making casting any aspersions that that's what this is about, but that is what happens. And I absolutely predict here and now that come January, the mayor will be pushing and seeking to raise the mayoral precept at our meeting in January. We've heard that this proposal hasn't come through Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There are reasons for that, but I think it's regrettable. And I want to ask two questions before I make my decision on how I'm going to vote on this. One is to the mayor and one is for information from officers, not today, but for the future that I would like. So, and I would like a reply to this. I don't want it just disappearing in the ether. I would like a reply. So my first query is that the cost of this investment is actually £4 million per annum. So if we want to continue this and make this sustainable, we are effectively signing off a £4 million per annum investment. So is the mayor, and this is a question to the mayor, is the mayor proposing to include this £4 million investment in the budget in January? And how is he proposing to pay for that? Or is the plan that this is going to end in either March, when this current money that we're being asked to agree runs out, or May, if he uses his increase in the mayoral precept to pay for it for a bit longer? I think that should have a very material impact on how we vote today, because if the plan is to build it in the future, and that's going to cost £4 million, that is a big decision, because that takes £4 million away from the rest of the network improvements that we want to make. If the decision is to stop this come end of March or come second week of May, then frankly, why are we doing it now? What is the point? We're just staving off the inevitable. And it would be much more responsible to put this money into fixing the Whittlesea problems, the Chatteris problems, the Littleport, Streatham, Ely, Little Thetford problems that we've got, the precept routes, the officers' problems because they haven't got enough staff. It's £1 million. We can do an awful lot with that money, and it's only going to last 3 months. So I want the answer to that question, and I don't want it disappearing in the wind. And my second question is that I would like to please formally request for members of the board a new list of all the subsidised routes that are currently running, because quite honestly, I've lost track of what's live and what isn't, and the known cost of those subsidies, because I don't know which routes are costing what, the number of passenger journeys and the data that we do have, and the cost, therefore, per passenger journey. And then that will enable us to see where we've still got holes in the data and to take sensible decisions, because we've got a budget to set in January. Councillor Bowden and I were castigated, I think, 2 years ago now, when we made the horrifying suggestions that we should change a few of our bus services because they were one of them was costing £125 per passenger journey. I don't think anybody around this table can look residents in the eye and say that it's reasonable to continue that sort of service that's operating at that level. For goodness sake, we have to put that money into where it's needed in the bus network. So I would like to have that information in, an updated version of our spreadsheet, which we keep and we run, and everybody's familiar with how that spreadsheet works. We need that information come January. And I do want to hear from the mayor about what his longer term proposals are for this, whether he is going to intend to seek in January to build this in for the next financial year as a sustained effort, or whether we're proposing to stop that, because it is a £4 million investment, and that will help me make my decision of what I do today. Thank you for your forbearance on the time.
No, I appreciate you obviously wanted to say a lot about the matter. I'm going to let the officer, Judith, come back on the request there, and then I'll maybe, as you've asked, I was going to leave it to the end, but I maybe need to come back on a few points. So over to you, Judith.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a lot of content in there, so it might save me. So, and do let me know if I've not taken a note to respond. So a number of remarks that cover, I think, the majority of the points. So firstly, just for clarity for all board members, the BSIP money for 24-25 is time limited to 24-25. So I think that's an important consideration. The second point regarding effectively the update, as you say, to the work that was done in 2023 and brought to this board, which sets out the kind of subsidy levels and updating all of that. We are absolutely looking to do that work and have scheduled that work for 25-26. I understand that you might be requesting that work more urgently, and we will need to consider that, but certainly we can clearly work to make sure that we can recirculate the spreadsheet that you referred to. Regarding the preset route position that you mentioned, obviously there has been considerable progress on the preset route. So there's broadly 60% of the package that is operating, and members might well be aware of the Tiger on Demand in West Huntingdonshire that went live a couple of weeks ago. There have been some issues in terms of the procurement, and we are looking at legal clarifications to the position, which is unfortunately not within our control at the moment, but clearly we will update members and indeed the wider community when we can. Regarding the number 9, obviously we've spoken a number of times about your concerns on that route. I can confirm that it is now that A2B and Stagecoach, who were looking at a partnership, are not. That does then release us to be able to intervene on that route. And I know the Assistant Director of Passenger Transport is looking to hold a meeting with residents in January to take that forward. So I think that concludes some of the points, but obviously the point concerning the March to beyond March, I will refer to the Mayor. Yes.
Okay. So Councillor Bailey. I don't know Bruce, but I agreed with him completely. It was nice of him to come onto the radio show on the Monday, so I'm grateful. A bit of a surprise, but I'm grateful that Dottie organised it. He's right. Loss of services. I remember it very clearly, particularly Chatteris. I even referenced it. You didn't mention that I referenced the fact that the BBC had reported that Chatteris would have no bus services. Not through my choice. It was through the choice of the operator. It's very important to realise that trying to run this fractured bus services network is down to a system that was introduced over 40 years ago and serves no one. You say, I am moving towards bus franchise. I am not. I am moving towards a process which is a consultation about bus franchising and enhanced partnership. And I am grateful that that is now completed and the officers are working hard to provide the evidence. For the reference is that both cases were audited and were put forward, and we will be looking at them all. And as a board, I'm looking forward to working with you all to consider the outcomes before any decision is made about what is best. But whatever it is, it has to be better than the system where currently operators can pull services without any kind of immediate recourse and leave communities hanging. You mentioned Littleport number 9. Again, you did not mention the operator. So you asked me about getting a network into a better place. I'm going to ask you that going forward, will you support me as we continue to make some of these difficult decisions? Today, it is just about an extension of the bus cap. I think generally, as was reported in the paper, to use some quotes, it is seen as a good thing. I think by people in this room, but also in terms of the investigations that were undertaken by the Department of Transport, where they surveyed that, people saw it as a good thing, and it was particularly high amongst those people with lower household incomes. I would argue taking on the cost of living crisis. And as a final comment, you ask about me making plans, but I think, Councillor Bailey, you seem to have learnt nothing from my way of trying to do things at board. I do it with consensus. This today is just about the next 3 months. This is just about, do we look at the budget as we stand? And I want to do it together with you, all of you, trying to get a consensus where we're working together. And that's what I'm going to be voting on today. The third point on the recommendation is to note that any consideration of extending the fare cap beyond the 31st of March 2025 will be part of a budget setting process, which I absolutely agree with you. We need as much information as possible, but I'm still being holden to that process, and I look forward to the discussions that we need to have there. I'm going to move on. Councillor. No, as I say, it is within my, it's time to move on. Councillor Bowden wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try and keep the party politics and the attacks on people away from what I have to say, because I'd like to talk about the actual bus services that we have and the experience that people have got, and in particular, the effect on low-income households, which I think is quite important. We have geographically 2 cities and 4 districts within our area. And all 6 of those areas are different. They have different geographies, they have different requirements, there are different levels of wealth, there are different levels of need. And necessarily, all 6 really have different requirements when it comes to public transport. I'm going to speak primarily, as you might imagine, about Fenland. I know that all the other areas, all the other 5 local areas can speak about that, and Lucy can speak about the whole of the county council. But I will speak from the perspective of Fenland. And in Fenland, we have seen, despite the amount of money which has been raised by the mayoral precept, we have seen a substantial reduction in bus service. And I fully understand and appreciate what you said earlier, Mayor, about the operators, but nevertheless, people see things as they are on the ground, and they see that they are paying significantly more money. Well, they used to pay nothing at all in a mayoral precept, so they're paying significant money, supposedly for a better bus service, and they actually end up with a significantly worse bus service. And I thank Councillor Bailey for mentioning, for straying out of East Cambs and going into Fenland, and mentioning, for example, the situation in Chatteris, where the number 8 bus service, which we used to have, which linked Chatteris with Cambridge City, where the effective loss of that has meant, as came out in the radio programme, that people lose options there. But it's more than just that. And it's easy just to concentrate on the service going to Cambridge. Throughout Fenland, the availability of buses for people to get from where they are to where they need to be has been reduced. Talking about deprivation, talking about those lowest income areas, the most, using the national indicator of multiple deprivation, the most deprived area of Whittlesea, for example, has had its bus service to Peterborough cut by 2/3 over the course of the last 2 years. Now, I'm not blaming the mayor for that. What I am saying is the mayor, and for that matter, the combined authority, haven't taken action to in any way remediate what the bus operator did there. And when you do have a loss of service of 2/3, it can hardly be surprising that you have a significant reduction in the number of passengers using what remaining service there is. For the whole of Whittlesea, there's been a reduction of 50% in terms of the bus service that we've got to Peterborough and back. And that has a debilitating effect. The number of emails I get from individuals in Whittlesea saying they just cannot continue to use the bus service because we've got reliability issues, which are a separate matter entirely. But the sheer reduction in the number of services means that the options they have available within reasonable amount of time to get from home to work and back have been lost. And these people are finding ways, primarily using private cars in order to get to and from work, which is the exact opposite of what we should be encouraging and what we should be trying to achieve. And I don't want to make it totally parochial with Whittlesey. We've lost our service, for example, between Whittlesey and Chatteris. That's disappeared completely. But on a Sunday, we cannot get in Fenland anymore from one town to another. There is no service left whatsoever from Wisbech, March, Chatteris, or Whittlesey from one town to the next. Not a single service. Completely lost. And when you have that level of reduction of service, I find it difficult to be able to support continuing to using what money is available to continuing to use to provide a subsidy for the bus cap. I must admit, I very much support keeping bus fares down, but it's very difficult to support that when there isn't a bus service for people to use. And to a great extent in Finland, that is the situation we now face. A significant element of that responsibility lies with the bus operators who've made choices. A significant element lies with the combined authority, which has failed to make choices. And people see that, and people are unfortunately voting with their feet in terms of what public transport or using public transport or not using public transport in the area. We've been promised a number of new bus services. We were promised it earlier this year, which we've yet to see actually materialize on the ground. And we've had no indication, the local town council being given no indication whatsoever of if and when those promised bus services actually will materialize. There's been no communication whatsoever. So it's not surprising that ordinary people who rely on bus services or want to rely on bus services are desperately cynical about what is happening. Now, we've had a conversation before in this board, Mayor, and you'll recall, where I pointed out that probably I have used bus services more than all the rest of the main board members combined over the years, because I have a particular, and have had for years, a particular passion for buses. So I talk from a biased perspective here of someone who really believes in and has used and wants to see the continued use of appropriate bus services in appropriate places. And I look for innovation in the future. I look for the opportunity for public transport in its widest sense to be able to provide what the public needs. I fully accept there are 6 areas in the combined authority, and I'm only talking about my one area of Fenland, but in Fenland, the public transport service is failing. The number 68 bus service, for example, in Wisbech, the number of complaints there now are as a result of the decision which was made by the combined authority in terms of its allocation of that particular route to a company which just cannot actually service the route. The number of complaints I make about them failing to follow correct bus routes, failing to stop at stops, people being... I had a message only yesterday from an elderly lady who was left shivering in the cold because the bus just didn't stop at the stop it was meant to.
Councillor Burden, I know this is
I'll
moving
conclude
into
here.
area which does sound very political.
I'll conclude. Oh, sorry. It's not. Oh, with all due respect, it's not political to talk about people's experience of the service.
My opinion, maybe not yours.
But you're entitled to your opinion. I'll conclude, Chair. You obviously don't want me to go into too much detail. I'll conclude by saying that I believe that it really is useful for us to use what monies we have available to provide a service, and then we can manage to think about the amount of fare subsidy, if any, that we provide. And as long as we are not providing an adequate service, then this is cosmetic.
Okay, just a point of clarity, just a simple, I guess, yes or no answer, Councillor Bowden. We did ask about pecuniary interest, and you did talk about the 68 there. I was wondering, do you want to make any pecuniary interest declaration?
No, thanks to the actions of the combined authority, I have no pecuniary interest at all in that service. The Fenland Association of Community Transport, which used to provide it, has had that service taken away, so there's no pecuniary interest involved.
Okay, but I'm sorry. Officer Judith, you wanted to come in.
Yes, if I could just respond on a couple of the issues that were raised from a sort of information to board members point of view, so that everybody is just aware of the latest position on some of the matters that Councillor Bowden has referred to. So regarding the current network, 88% of the current network is run by the private sector, and there is kind of one operator that is perhaps larger than most, and I'm sure we all know who we refer to there. So on those routes, on that mileage, any of those routes, they can serve 70 days notice to change those services. And then we as a public authority clearly have to bring any decisions about how we respond to any of those things through this board with our budget to try and identify what can be done. But it does mean that, you know, the system is predominantly run by the commercial operators, and we are working across the area to currently deliver 12% of the mileage. And that 70-day notice does mean that it's very challenging to respond. In addition, you've also referred to the services on the 68. Obviously, we did a procurement of that, and that has been sort of checked and challenged, and that procurement was completed accurately and properly and awarded, and there is ongoing discussions, as you would expect from a contract management point of view, if issues are arising in terms of the delivery of that service. There's a wider issue, as I mentioned in my previous response, regarding clearly over 60% of the preset route services are running, but we have been placed in a difficult legal position, which we are seeking specialist advice to try and resolve in concluding the final operators to make sure that those services can commence. And it is the case that as a result of that situation, it has been difficult to communicate, and I appreciate that absolutely. And it's very difficult when you're in a legal getting legal advice in terms of continuing to communicate on that. But I agree, we absolutely need to think about the messaging and also resolve the situation so that the services can be delivered as quickly as possible. But I hope that's useful to the board. Thank you, Mayor.
Some excellent points of clarification there, Judith. Thank you. Al, from the Business Board, you indicated you want to speak.
Thank you, Chair. It's a challenging one because there's quite a few perspectives, and it's very easy to actually reflect on them and say that they're all strongly grounded in common sense and purpose. One of the challenges from the Business Board was reflecting on the fact that there are almost two separate challenges afoot. One is the breadth and capacity of the infrastructure, and I think it's been articulated well that in some areas it's just simply not good enough right now and not available as frequently enough as it needs to be. On the other hand, there is where there is established infrastructure and the routes are being used, how do we ensure momentum in terms of engagement? I can see alignment with both aspects. So on this topic, I chose to share it with all of the Business Board members and seek their feedback explicitly on this agenda item because of the link and the previous discussions at the Business Board with how this links with skills and with access to workforce in business. And actually, the points raised resonate in both cases, but there was a unanimous perspective that just because there is a clear and demonstrable need to improve the breadth and capacity of the network does not mean that necessarily we shouldn't also, particularly given the time limitation of those funds, be trying to maintain the momentum of usage on what we do have. Otherwise, potentially it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, I acknowledge there are strong and valid arguments from both perspectives. And it comes down to views, but given the Business Board have shared with me unanimously their perspective, that is the perspective that I will vote with.
Thank you. The only person who hasn't spoke is Councillor Anna Smith, representing City Council for Cambridge, but also deputies, and dare I say also the lead member for the Transport Committee. So I'll come to you, Anna, and then I'll wrap up.
Thank you, Mayor Dr. Nick. And I could talk for hours. I won't, just to reassure the board on that. It will obviously come as no surprise that I'm supportive of this measure, but I do want to put on record that I've also discussed this at length with the governing group at Cambridge City, who are also supportive of this. So this is not just my personal response. This is a response of myself and my colleagues. First of all, I want to go back to Councillor Williams' point, who I think you make an excellent point, Councillor Williams, in terms of prudence on this. I think the issue you raise about if we don't make this decision now, it could well be a false economy. So what we're looking at here is a proactive measure. So we're working with the bus companies to ensure that we can keep the fares at this level for the moment, rather than have to respond after the fact to what may be cuts in routes that we all value because of that marginal difference. So I think that's a really important one. And I do want to remind us that what we are not doing here is having a debate on the entire bus network and the full bus system. What we're doing is a very specific thing. We are ensuring that we can have a wider debate on the cap in January, should we wish to do so as a board. Because if we don't do so, we will not have that £2 cap from the 1st of January. Which means that then we'd be having a discussion in our board meeting in January about whether to reinstate something that had already gone. And I think that's a much more difficult conversation, which is why we're doing this today. So it's a very specific thing we're voting on. I did want to make a couple of clarifications. I think it's important that we all remember that it isn't that the bus cap has been changed. The bus cap was due to end. If nobody had stepped in, the bus cap would have ended completely at a national level on the 31st of December. It was only programmed to that date. What has happened is that has been extended to £3. What we are looking at is whether we can extend it, at least in the short term, to £2 here locally. And I say at least in the short term because I want to bring us back to the fact we are discussing that short-term measure today, and that's all we are discussing today. And it is proper that those bigger discussions happen in our budget meeting in January, where we can look at any proposed wider measures alongside the rest of the budget so we can make that balanced decision. The Mayor mentioned it, but I do feel it's important. And, you know, I was listening in to the local radio discussion, and Bruce, again, thank you, because I think it was a really important intervention. And the Mayor has mentioned it already, because I was sitting in the Mayor's seat when we discussed what we would do to ensure that Chatteris retained bus routes, because had we not stepped in 2022 as a board, with the majority of us supporting the proposals for additional funding, Chatteris at that point would have had no bus routes whatsoever. It would have been entirely cut off from buses because of the cuts that commercial companies have made. And I think we do have to remember that. None of us would say we have a perfect bus system, but we have made interventions that have made a material difference to people's lives in what we have done as a board. And I think we should pause and think about that. Because over the last few years, there's been a huge amount of work to start reversing years of neglect of our public transport system. So we've put investment into bus networks. We've introduced the Tiger Card. We've scrapped the concessionary peak time limits. We all know there is a lot more to do. You know, that's why we as a board have decided to consult on bus reform. It's why our officers are currently working so hard to scrutinise that evidence, to bring that evidence to us to look at so that we can help inform Mayor Dr. Nick's decision in due course. But I want us to come back to the very specific issue we're debating today, because it is very specific. It's about a short-term extension of the cap to allow us to make any longer-term decisions we want to make in our budget debates after Christmas. Now, I don't think any of us would say we have the perfect network. I think that would be ridiculous. I doubt anywhere in the country would say that we have a perfect bus network. Quite frankly, if anyone says that, they're not looking closely enough. But for me, I think we still need to do everything we possibly can to support our residents right now. And this is something we can do to support our residents right now, something very tangible to support them by keeping their fares low. So I will be supporting this measure today. Thank you, Mayor Doctor.
Thanks you, Anna. I was intending now to wrap up, to be honest. Your final flourish there is probably taken away a lot of my thing. I just want to reassure everybody in the room, representatives, that I've obviously picked up some have spoken for a very long time and some have spoken for a very short time. And I have got a feeling in the room to sort of the level of support or challenge to what is in front of us today. To reiterate your point, Anna, we have challenges as articulated, be they in Chatteris previously and ongoing, Littleport, Whittlesea, South Cambridgeshire, in the city, Peterborough as well. The phrase that Councillor Bailey used was, we need to be getting the network into a better place. And for me, this is a request. Having heard all the advice, I'll be making my vote accordingly. I think this is part of a bigger picture. We are in a situation started decades ago in the 80s when bus deregulation gave us a system which now means that, to reiterate the point made by officers, 88% of the network is commercially run and we don't have direct control over that. As you pointed out, Anna, that is why we've gone out to a consultation. That is why the previous government said, make buses better. That is why the previous government introduced a cap. Unfortunately, it was going to finish at the end of this year, and the current government is increasing it. But we do have in devolution, and we do have in a combined authority, the ability to work together to do local solutions that work for local people. And in the meantime, there will be people, as articulated by yourself, Councillor Bowden, who feel frustrated that it's not happening quickly enough. But by God, what we've had to do over the last few years, the situation would be a lot worse if we hadn't had to do the interventions that we have done so far. So I thank you all for turning up in a sort of pre-Christmas Friday the 13th emergency meeting to discuss this one quite specific issue. I would now propose that we move to the vote. I am actually on this one requesting that the vote on this item is recorded. Now I need to have support for this request. So can I have support for request of a recorded vote? Councillor Ellis, Councillor Anna Smith. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. Fine. So just to read this out. Recommendation A asks that we consider retaining the bus fare cap at £2 per single journey for those participating operators in the combined authority area from the 1st of January to the 2025 to 31st of March 2025. Do I have, well, obviously that's what we were to consider. Now I'm going to think, do I have a proposer? In fact, no, I'm going to propose it. I'm going to propose and then ask for a seconder for retaining the cap at £2 per single journey for those participating operators in the combined authority area from the 1st of January 2025 to the 31st of March 2025. Do I have a seconder? I'll take it from the chair of the Transport Committee, Councillor Anna Smith. Okay, we're going to move to the vote. I'll hand over now to Democratic Services to take the vote, please.
Thank you. So I'll call everybody's name out, and if you can just tell me whether you're for, against, or abstaining. And I'm going to go around that way. So Councillor John Williams, Councillor Sarah Comboy, Councillor Lucy Ness-Singer, Councillor Chris Bowden, Councillor Anna Bailey,
Abstain.
Al Kingsley,
For.
Councillor Angus Ellis,
For.
Councillor Anna Smith,
For.
and Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson.
I am in favour.
Thank you very much. So I can confirm that that is 7 for and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. So that's carried.
Mayor, could I make a very brief factual correction to the record? I referred to 2022 on the earlier precept changes when I meant 2023. And I just want to make sure that's noted.
Okay. Okay. Recommendation B asks us to delegate authority to the Assistant Director for Transport, Public Transport Services, to engage with local operators to ensure the new local fare cap is implemented. I move this recommendation from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you again from Councillor Anna Smith. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, that's carried by a majority. And recommendation C is just to note that any consideration on extending the fare cap beyond 31st of March 2025 will, of course, as I've mentioned, be part of the 2025 to 2026 budget setting report in January. Thank you. That's the close of today's emergency meeting. Thank you again for all those for making time, particularly to those who had to jump in at the last minute. Wish you all the very best for Christmas and the New Year. Thank you.